He believed he was shaping a successor, but in truth, he was watering a garden of violence with his own hands. From a distance, the conflict between Luca and Vittorio looks like another tale of mafia betrayal. But beneath the gunfire lies something far more disturbing. A boy raised inside brutality often learns to mistake control for care and cruelty for love. This is not merely a revenge story, it is a study of inherited trauma, masculine pride, and the fatal illusion that power can replace tenderness. When Luca finally confronts the man who both protected and poisoned his life, the question is no longer who will survive, but whether either of them was ever free.
Dawn breaks over St. Michael's Hospital in Chicago, casting a deceptive golden hue. Within the emergency room, however, the atmosphere is heavy with human affliction, making the morning light feel like a cruel paradox. And here, in this crucible of misfortune, destiny introduces a new dimension of pain. A solitary woman, utterly broken, cradles a small child, her attire so frayed it appears to be dissolving into memory. Disheveled hair frames a face marked by profound exhaustion, with dark circles beneath her eyes like medals from an unwinnable war. She is Elena Vance. The child, her universe, is 4-year-old Lily. The child's cheeks, once vibrant, are now a stark, unnatural white. Each breath a monumental effort. She clings to a worn rabbit, its fur a testament to years of affection, the sole gift from her mother, now Lily's only talisman against a consuming fever. For 3 agonizing hours, Elena had pleaded with every passing nurse, only to learn that in Chicago, to be uninsured is to be invisible. At last her endurance fractured and she forces herself to rise. Each step toward the reception counter is a struggle against an unseen weight. Her knees buckle upon arrival and she crumples to the floor, her body still a shield for Lily. Please, she fractures the silence, her voice thin as ice. She is all I have. Take everything I possess, but save my daughter. The nurse regards her with a fleeting expression, perhaps pity, perhaps annoyance, before a professional detachment descends. It's a look forged by exposure to unending despair. Ma'am, without insurance or payment, our options are limited. It's hospital policy. The words are a physical blow. Elena shakes her head, unable to process the verdict. I will pay. I'll arrange it. Look at her. She's burning. She can't breathe. I'm sorry, but there is nothing I can do. Elena's ensuing scream tears through the sterile air, a sound beyond a mere request for aid. It is the sound of a psyche collapsing under the weight of its own impotence. A mother must watch her child decline, imprisoned by the inertia of the crowd. Faces turn, offering brief sympathy or the classic metropolitan stare of detachment. But not one individual acts. Not one. In that moment, Elena Vance experiences absolute and total abandonment. She presses her lips against Lily's fevered brow, her tears carving paths of grief. Stay with me, my love, she murmurs. Mommy will make this right, I swear. Yet the promise rings hollow, a desperate fiction. At the opposite end of street, Michael's, a Rolls-Royce Phantom, as black as oblivion, glides toward the VIP entrance. Its doors open with mechanical precision. 2 men in dark suits emerge, their gazes methodically scanning the perimeter. Only then does the principal figure appear. Dominic Blackwell steps out, claiming the pavement like a sovereign. At 37, he carries the weight of a man who has lived multiple lifetimes. His suit, a flawless Milanese creation, is a study in dark elegance. A Patek Philippe on his wrist is valued more than the average home, but his eyes hold the true narrative. They are the gray of a gathering storm, possessing a coldness that speaks of sights that would fracture an ordinary psyche. Publicly, Dominic Blackwell is a philanthropist, a benefactor of hospitals and schools. In the city's hidden strata, however, he is an entirely different entity. He is the undisputed sovereign of Chicago's criminal underworld, a name uttered only in hushed tones. He is a man whose directives are absolute and whose rivals simply cease to exist. he is present to inspect a new wing funded by his foundation, a masterful act of public relations and a perfect conduit for laundering his gains. It was meant to be a routine appearance, a brief consultation with the board, a carefully staged photograph, then a return to the enterprises that truly defined him. His guards form a protective diamond as he moves through a private corridor. Hospital employees flatten themselves against the walls, unwilling to risk his notice. The sound of his Italian leather shoes against the tile is a measured, relentless rhythm. Dominic is reaching for the VIP elevator call button when he hears it. A cry, distinctly female, imbued with a desperation that cuts through the building's managed quiet. His hand pauses mid-air. Deep within him, a chamber of memory he had long since sealed begins to fracture. That voice. He recognizes it not as a memory, but as a melody that once anchored his own survival. Acting on pure instinct, Dominic pivots from the elevator. His guards exchange confused glances but follow without question. Their employer was a creature of cold logic, not impulse. Yet here he is, moving toward the emergency room as if drawn by an undeniable force. The sound of weeping grows more raw, more visceral with every step he takes. As Dominic rounds the final corner, his entire existence comes to a halt. The heart that had remained steady through gunfire and betrayal now falters. There, on the sterile floor, is a woman in tattered clothing. Her hair is in shambles. Her body trembles as she clutches a small child. This is a ghost of the girl he once knew. Life has etched its cruelty upon her, and poverty has extinguished her light. But he would know her across any chasm of time or circumstance. Elena Vance, the woman who disappeared from his world 5 years ago, leaving no trace. The woman whose absence instigated a search that nearly consumed him. The woman he had to excise from his memory to continue functioning. She is here, she is real, and she is holding a child. Dominic stands frozen in the doorway, the most formidable man in Chicago rendered inert by a specter from his past. The memories cascade over him. 5 years prior, Elena Vance was 23, her eyes reflecting a future full of vibrant possibility. She was a waitress in a small Italian restaurant the first time Dominic Blackwell entered. He was there for a discreet meeting with his lieutenants. She was there simply to serve their table, and in a single glance, his personal cosmos tilted on its axis. He recalled her smile that evening, not a performance, but a genuine warmth that reached a part of him he believed had long since turned to ash. He returned weekly, then every few days, and soon, every night, just to see her, just to hear her laugh, to feel for a handful of stolen moments like a man who could know a simple love. In a life defined by violence, Elena was his sanctuary. She never probed into his affairs, the origin of his scars, or the men who moved in his shadow. She simply offered him an affection so pure it demanded nothing in return. And for the first time in his existence, Dominic Blackwell allowed himself to hope. Then one morning, she had vanished. No letter, no call, no final word. He awoke in his penthouse to an unnerving silence. Her presence had been erased. Her clothes, her books, every artifact of her life with him was gone, as if she were a figment of his imagination. Dominic unleashed the full force of his resources on the city to locate her. He leveraged every contact, called in every favor, and for 6 months he pursued a phantom. It was then that whispers began among his own men that he was losing his focus. Rival organizations sensed a weakness and began to test his territory. But he could not accept the devastating truth. Elena Vance was not taken. She had fled. She had seen the darkness within him, the violence he commanded, and she had run. That realization is what finally forged his heart into something cold and impenetrable. So he consciously purged her from his thoughts. He engaged with other women, but his emotional core remained barricaded. He became more ruthless, more detached, the city's ultimate predator. For 5 years, Dominic told himself she was a closed chapter. But now he understood he had been searching for her face in every crowd. He had been listening for her voice in every silent space, seeing her form in his dreams. The present moment crashes back with brutal clarity. Elena looks up, her face a mask of grief. Her tear-swollen eyes meet his across the room. The instant she recognizes him, her body goes rigid, and he reads the single dominant emotion on her face: fear. It is not shock or relief. It is a pure, instinctual terror. She pulls the child tighter against her body, a desperate, protective gesture, as if to shield her from his gaze. Lily emits a faint cough, a tremor passing through her that breaks the spell, pulling Elena back into her immediate crisis. Her gaze breaks from Dominic's, her arms becoming a fortress around her daughter as she presses a kiss to Lily's burning forehead. But the moment was enough. Dominic had seen it all. He had seen that primal, maternal defensiveness, the unadulterated panic, and he had seen the child. Dominic Blackwell did not construct an empire on hesitation. He moves now with the same lethal certainty that saw him through countless conflicts. His security detail parts for him instinctively, sensing the shift in their leader. A profound silence falls over the waiting room, as every eye fixes on the man in the dark suit who moves as if he holds the deed to the very air they breathe. And in this city, that perception is not far from the truth. 4 powerful strides bring Dominic to the reception desk. The nurse who had dismissed Elena only moments before looks up with irritation, but her words dissolve as she recognizes him. Every person in Chicago knows that face. This child, Dominic's voice cuts through the tension, as sharp and precise as a surgical blade, will receive the finest care this institution can provide immediately. It was not a request, nor was it a suggestion. It was a decree from a man unaccustomed to refusal. The blood drains from the nurse's face. Her hand trembled as she lifted the receiver. Yes, Mr. Blackwell, at once. In that instant, the emergency room's entire dynamic inverted. Doctors appeared from nowhere, nurses rushed forward with a gurney, and a flurry of commands filled the air. The bureaucratic inertia that had held Elena captive for hours was obliterated by Dominic's mere presence. Elena observed this whirlwind from the floor in a stupor, still clutching Lily, unable to comprehend the sudden reversal. When a nurse reached for her daughter, she recoiled instinctively. "We need to examine her now, ma'am," a physician stated gently. "She will be in our care." Elena's gaze shot to Dominic, a maelstrom of shock, terror, and a fragile sliver of hope. "Dominic, I cannot be indebted to you." But he was deaf to her words, his entire being focused on the small child. The commotion stirred the girl from her fevered sleep. Her eyes opened, weak yet intrigued by the surrounding urgency. She looked toward the towering figure above them, and in that moment, Dominic Blackwell's lungs ceased to function. They were gray eyes. The child's eyes were the color of slate, not the warm umber of Elena's. They were not the blue or green of some anonymous father. They were gray, the precise shade of a gathering storm, the very color that met Dominic's reflection each morning. They were his mother's eyes, his grandfather's, the immutable signature of the Blackwell lineage stamped upon every member of his bloodline. The world dissolved into a low hum. His focus contracted to these gray eyes, blinking up at him from a small, ashen face. He turned back to Elena, his voice fractured and stripped of its authority. What is her age? Elena's lips parted, but no sound emerged as she clutched Lily closer. Elena. Dominic's voice deepened into a low, menacing register. What is her age? She remained silent, yet her expression screamed the answer with an agony of guilt and fear. It was etched in the tears now streaming down her cheeks and in the crushing silence that stood between them. Dominic's hands coiled into bloodless fists. His jaw was set so tightly it threatened to splinter. 4 years old. The child was 4 and Elena had vanished 5 years prior. The arithmetic was brutally simple. Its conclusion, a visceral blow to his core. This was his child, his daughter. He had lived without knowing of her existence. They wheeled Lily away on a gurney, her small form appearing achingly fragile on the stark white linens. Elena felt a desperate urge to follow, to hold Lily's hand through the terrifying procedures. Yet the staff assured her the child was with their best team, that every measure would be taken to save her. Elena was forced to place her faith in their words. Dominic's men then escorted her to the VIP wing on the highest floor. The ascent in the elevator felt like an eternity. She was compressed into one corner while Dominic occupied the other, a human manifestation of a thunderhead in a confined space. No words were exchanged, no glances were shared. The VIP waiting lounge was another world entirely from the chaos below. It contained plush leather seating, muted lighting, and a private coffee station. The space was engineered for comfort, but to Elena it felt like a gilded cage. She collapsed into a chair near the window, her legs finally failing her. Dominic remained standing, his back toward her, observing the Chicago skyline like a strategist, plotting his next campaign. After an immeasurable silence, he finally spoke. 5 years. His voice was unnervingly calm, the kind of quiet that precedes a cataclysm. You vanished for 5 years, and you deprived me of my own child. Elena felt her throat constrict. She yearned to make him comprehend her plight. But how could one articulate 5 years of flight and concealment? 5 years of raising their daughter, knowing her father was a truth that could never be spoken. I was left with no other choice, she whispered. Dominic pivoted, his gray eyes like shards of ice. There is always a choice, Elena, and you chose to flee. No. Her voice fractured. No, you cannot understand. Then illuminate it for me, he commanded, closing the distance between them. Make me understand why I have a daughter whom I'm only now meeting. Why I was denied her first words, her first steps. 4 years of her life that are irretrievably lost to me. The tears finally broke through her control. I was compelled to leave. I was told we would be endangered if I remained, that you must never learn of her existence, that my life would be ruined if I ever approached you again. Dominic became utterly still, his rage transmuted into something far colder. Who? The word was a savage utterance. Who delivered this threat? Elena's lips quivered. She attempted to form the name, but 5 years of absolute fear strangled the word in her throat. Her eyes betrayed her, flicking beyond his shoulder toward the elevators. Dominic noticed it. The man misses nothing. He turned just as the elevator chimed. The doors parted to reveal Victoria Blackwell. At 62 years of age, her authority was timeless, embodied in a tailored suit and immaculate silver hair. She moved with the assurance of one born to wealth and influence. Her eyes, the same gray as her son's, surveyed the area. When they fell upon Elena, for a fleeting instant, Victoria Blackwell appeared as though she had seen a specter. Her entire existence was built upon the absolute control of her universe. In 62 years, she had seldom been caught off guard. Yet the sight of Elena Vance in this room shattered her composure. For one terrible second, Victoria's flawless mask slipped. Her eyes widened in an expression that resembled fear. Then, just as swiftly, her defenses were restored. Her spine straightened. Her chin lifted. The matriarch had returned. But Dominic had already witnessed the fracture. He had seen everything. "Mother," his voice was lethal. "You were aware." Victoria glanced between Elena and her son, attempting to maintain her poise. "Dominic, I did not expect you. The board meeting." "You were aware?" He repeated the statement, each word landing like a hammer blow. "All this time, you knew her location. You knew about the child." A muscle twitched in Victoria's jaw. "Dominic, allow me to explain. Did you force her to leave?" The question hung in the space between them like a blade. Victoria did not flinch. She met her son's fury with the same glacial resolve she had employed for decades. "I did what was necessary for the protection of this family." Dominic's fists tightened further. "Answer my question. Did you force her to leave?" Victoria raised her chin, her eyes filled with pure defiance. "She was inconsequential, Dominic. A waitress without a single connection. A girl from poverty who would have dismantled everything we have constructed." On trembling legs, Elena rose. Her terror was incinerated by a new kind of fire, granting her the strength to retaliate. "You presented me with an ultimatum," Elena stated, her voice shaking but clear. "You arrived at my residence late at night. You instructed me to disappear, lest you ensure Dominic never knew he had a child. You swore to brand me an adulterer and claimed the baby wasn't his. You promised my ruin if I ever returned." Victoria's expression was like stone. "I offered you a choice." "You left me destitute," Elena's voice broke. "Your agents monitored my every action. You vowed to destroy me if I stayed, wagering Dominic would believe your falsehoods and that my child would be taken from me. And through it all, Dominic was a silent effigy." But Elena could perceive the tempest gathering in his eyes. He turned his gaze upon his mother, and his voice was cold enough to extinguish stars. "It was all for my benefit." He uttered a laugh devoid of humor, an expression of pure betrayal. "You stole 5 years of my life, Mother. 5 years of my daughter's existence, her first smile, her first step, her first word. 5 years with the only woman I have ever truly loved." Victoria's facade finally fractured. "Dominic, you must understand." "No." The single word cut her off. "You will understand this. Elena and my daughter are returning home with me. You are to stay away until I instruct you otherwise." He turned his back on her without another word. Victoria Blackwell stood alone in the corridor, observing her son depart with the ghost she had spent 5 years attempting to bury. For the first time, she was adrift, with no idea how to repair the devastation she had wrought. 3 hours passed like 3 lifetimes as Elena kept vigil. Her hands were clenched together so tightly the knuckles were white. Each sound made her heart hammer in her chest. Food, sleep, and even air were concepts beyond her consideration since they had taken Lily. Dominic was a dark silhouette against the window. His silence an immense barrier between them since the confrontation with his mother. The silence in the room was so thick it was suffocating, and Elena was lost in a silent prayer. Then, the door finally opened. Dr. Harrison, the head of pediatrics, emerged holding a chart, his expression weary but professional. Elena launched to her feet, her legs threatening to buckle. Mrs. Eve. Vance, he finished gently. Lily is stable. Her fever has subsided and her vital signs are improving. The intervention was successful. A choked sob tore from Elena's throat. Her hands flew to her mouth as relief overcame her in a cascade of tears. She is all right. She will be all right. She will require continuous monitoring and long-term care, Dr. Harrison added. But be assured your daughter will make a full recovery. Elena collapsed back into the chair, her body trembling as the accumulated dread was finally released. Thank you, she managed to say, repeating the words like a litany, uncertain if she was thanking the doctor, God, or some cosmic entity that had finally granted her mercy. Moments later, nurses wheeled Lily's gurney out. The child was conscious, her gray eyes fluttering as she observed her surroundings. A trace of color had returned to her cheeks, and she was clutching a stuffed rabbit as if her life depended on it. Elena was at her side instantly, gathering her daughter in a fierce embrace, inhaling her scent, feeling her warmth. Alive. Her child was alive. Mommy, Lily's voice emerged as a drowsy whisper. Why are your eyes wet? These are happy tears, sweetheart. Elena kissed her forehead. Only the very good kind. Lily's gaze then drifted past her mother, settling on a tall, dark figure standing nearby. A flicker of curiosity ignited in her weary eyes. Who is that, Mommy? And with that, the air was stolen from Elena's lungs. Her mouth opened, but no words came. How does one begin to explain a phantom father who has been absent for a child's entire life? Before she could formulate a reply, Dominic began to move toward them. His steps were slow and deliberate, as if he were approaching a timid creature poised for flight. Approaching them, he collapsed his imposing frame, descending to Lily's eye level. In this single gesture, the architect of Chicago's underworld, a name that could fracture the city's calm, let the glacial facade in his eyes dissolve. I will be the reason you are never unwell again, he murmured. I give you my word. Lily's gaze remained fixed on him through a long, suspended silence. Then, from a place of pure childhood innocence, a smile unfurled across her face. Okay. A powerful constriction seized Dominic's chest. That solitary word, that simple expression sent a fissure through a part of him he believed to be forged from solid steel. Rising, he faced Elena and issued a decree. You will both return with me to Blackwell Manor. Dominic, that is impossible. This is not a negotiation, Elena. His voice softened, but only fractionally. Lily requires professional medical attention. You require sanctuary. I possess both. You are returning home. Every fiber of Elena's being urged her to flee, to spirit her child away from his perilous reality. Yet a glance at Lily's pallid face and her own profound exhaustion confirmed her entrapment. She possessed nothing. No resources, no shelter, no alternative path. Further down the corridor, Victoria stood, a silent, statuesque observer. She watched the procession as Dominic guided them toward the private lift. Her focus was locked on the child, on the gray eyes that were an undeniable signature of the Blackwell lineage. For one fleeting moment, an emotion, perhaps regret, surfaced before being entombed behind an impenetrable mask. An entire obsidian motorcade awaited them outside the hospital. 3 identical SUVs with darkened windows were flanked by armed sentinels. Elena entered the central vehicle with Lily on her lap, and Dominic took his place beside them. As the convoy departed from St. Michael's Hospital, Elena saw the city become an indistinct blur. She was plunging back into the existence she had fled 5 years prior, a realm of dominance, threat, and excavated secrets. Her sole recourse was to hope for survival in this second chapter. The convoy ascended the winding road, exchanging Chicago's luminescence for the northern hills' deep shadows. Through the tinted window, Elena witnessed the city's glow being consumed by the encroaching night. Lily was in a deep sleep against her chest, her small fingers still clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. Then, the manor materialized. Cresting the hill, Blackwell Manor appeared as a Gothic citadel hewn from shadow and stone. Its Victorian silhouette clawed at the heavens with sharp, menacing towers. Immense windows gazed down like colossal, judgmental eyes. Stone gargoyles were perched on the roof, their features locked in expressions of eternal aggression. Wrought iron gates, standing 15 feet tall, were crowned with spikes that glinted under the moon. Surveillance systems silently documented their arrival from every angle. Armed patrols moved in pairs along the perimeter, their armaments starkly visible. Searchlights swept across the immaculate grounds, systematically erasing every shadow. This estate was not a residence, it was a bastion of power. Elena felt a tightening in her chest as the gates swung inward to grant them passage. 5 years ago, Dominic's influence was an abstract concept to her. Now, witnessing the tangible kingdom he had erected on this secluded mountain, she finally grasped its true scale. Their vehicle halted at the grand entryway. Dominic exited first, then assisted Elena, who carried the sleeping Lily. As the massive doors opened, a formation of household staff stood in greeting. They lowered their heads in deference as she passed, but Elena intercepted the furtive glances they exchanged. The arched eyebrows, the hushed remarks concealed by feigned smiles. Their gazes catalogued her worn attire, her disheveled appearance, and the unknown child in her arms. She was the anomaly, the foreign element, and their scrutiny made this unequivocally clear. Dominic led her through the vast foyer, across marble floors illuminated by opulent crystal chandeliers. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors observed them from ornate frames. Every surface gleamed with the level of affluence Elena had only witnessed in publications. They ascended a grand staircase, traversed a long corridor, and arrived at a pair of double doors. "The East Wing," he announced, pushing them open. "It is yours." The moment Elena crossed the threshold, the breath was stolen from her lungs. The suite was more expansive than her entire Detroit apartment. Silk draperies flanked floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the city's lights. A massive 4-poster bed dominated one wall, adorned with fabrics that cost more than her annual income. In one corner, a curated collection of new toys was arranged: dolls, plush animals, and a pastel rocking horse. Awakening in her mother's embrace, the child's perception of the opulent room shifts to pure astonishment. Her question, "Are we in a palace?" highlights the profound divide between childlike wonder and the gilded cage they now occupy. Elena's manufactured smile is a fragile barrier, an attempt to preserve an innocence already under siege. As Lily is enveloped by the bed, she is tucked into a fantasy wholly unaware of its cost. A stuffed rabbit, a totem of a life left behind, remains clutched in slumber. At the window, Elena confronts a cityscape that is a brilliant, terrifying expanse. This vista is a monument to a beautiful and predatory world. Her hand on the cold glass is a tactile acknowledgement of a known truth. Beneath the glittering surface of this world, a festering darkness thrives, waiting. a world built on violence, deception, and death. The life she had escaped was now a gilded prison. Down in the darkened garden, Elena was unaware of a hidden observer. Serena Cole stood beneath a sprawling oak, her features cloaked by the night. The whispers had already reached her, slithering through the manor's corridors like an unseen poison. Dominic had returned, and he had brought a woman and a child with him. Gazing at the silhouette framed in the east wing window, Serena's nails bit into her palms. Her eyes burned with an emotion far more corrosive than jealousy. It was a pure, chilling malice. In the west wing of Blackwell Manor, far from the new arrivals, Serena Cole was awake in the darkness. Her chambers were as lavishly appointed as any other in the residence. Bespoke furniture, imported textiles, a wardrobe filled with garments exceeding the value of an average person's yearly earnings. Dominic had provided her with every imaginable luxury, all except for the one possession she truly coveted, his heart. At 30, Serena possessed a beauty that was almost arresting, with high cheekbones, deep crimson lips, and amber eyes that could shift from inviting to lethal in a heartbeat. For 2 years, she had been Dominic's companion, 2 years in his bed, 2 years as the figure on his arm at social functions. Her position as the consort to the king silently acknowledged and never challenged. For 2 years, she had persisted, believing he would eventually see her as more than a temporary fixture. She understood she was a replacement. That had always been clear. Dominic never spoke of the woman from his past. Yet Serena recognized the void in his gaze, the way he would look past her as if seeking a face that was not hers. He had never once uttered the phrase, "I love you." Nevertheless, she held on, convinced that time would erode his defenses, that her devotion would eventually be rewarded. She envisioned a day when he would awaken and recognize her as his definitive choice. Tonight, that entire fantasy disintegrated. Serena's focus was riveted to her laptop screen. Months prior, she had commissioned a hacker to compromise the estate's security network. It was a transgression for which Dominic would have her eliminated. But information is supremacy. Serena understood that survival required staying ahead of events. On the display, the East Wing suite was clearly visible. Elena sat on the bed, stroking the sleeping Lily's hair as Dominic observed from the doorway. He was simply watching them. But the expression on his face sent a shard of ice through Serena's very soul. She had never witnessed him regard anything with such reverence. Not his empire, not his triumphs, and certainly not her. This was the look of a man who had rediscovered a priceless artifact he believed was lost to time. Serena was pressing her nails into her own skin, leaving behind crimson crescents. Suddenly, a memory from 10 years ago surfaced. She had been only 20. Her father, Vincent Cole, was one of Dominic's most trusted lieutenants. Their existence was comfortable, secure. Serena had been raised to believe the world was hers to claim, but that the Southside Syndicate initiated its power play. On a stormy Tuesday, they ambushed her father. 17 gunshots later, his body was discarded in an alley. Serena was left utterly alone, convinced she was the next target. But Dominic intervened. He brought her into his protection, offering her sanctuary when her world had imploded. Over time, her gratitude had twisted into a consuming obsession. She had labeled this fixation as love. She convinced herself he reciprocated the sentiment, despite his silence. Tonight, the stark, unvarnished truth confronted her. Dominic Blackwell had never truly cared for her. He was merely playing a patient game, awaiting the return of a ghost from his history. With a decisive sound, Serena snapped the laptop closed. Her hands trembled. not from sorrow, but from a pure, incendiary rage. This was an anger that felt like venom coursing through her. She would not forfeit the position she had so carefully constructed, not for some destitute woman and her unacknowledged child. Not after everything she had endured. Serena retrieved her phone, dialing a number she knew intimately. A man's voice responded after 2 rings. "I require information," she stated, her voice like frozen steel. Everything on Elena Vance, her whereabouts for the last 5 years, her activities, her associates. Uncover every single secret she possesses. She terminated the call and gazed at her own image in the darkened screen. The face reflected back at her was that of a predator. An entire week elapsed within the confines of Blackwell Manor. This meant 7 days of private physicians and continuous nursing care. 7 days of medication, recuperation, and gourmet food prepared by a personal chef. This was a standard of care Elena could have only imagined. And under this constant vigilance, Lily began to recover. Vitality returned to her features like blossoms emerging after a harsh winter. Luminosity returned to her gray eyes. Her laughter, a sound utterly dissonant within the somber mansion, began to resonate through its corridors, coaxing smiles from the staff. The child's recovery was astonishingly swift, her small frame channeling a formidable Blackwell resilience. Yet the most profound transformation was catalyzed by an entirely unforeseen agent. Dominic Blackwell, architect of a syndicate founded on terror, found his authority entirely subjugated by a nascent paternal devotion. Each morning, the machinations of his empire were paused for Lily. Each night, his return was marked by a pilgrimage to her bedside. His men watched, stunned, as their fearsome leader metamorphosed into a figure they could not recognize. A father. One afternoon, Elena discovered a scene of profound cognitive dissonance in the sunroom. Drawn by the sound of her daughter's laughter, she followed it, only to halt at the threshold, arrested by the sight. On the floor sat the cross-legged figure of Dominic Blackwell, the unchallenged sovereign of Chicago. A flimsy plastic tiara rested askew on his head, a fragile coronet on a king of crime. In his immense hand, a miniature teacup appeared almost absurd. Opposite him, Lily presided over a solemn tea party for her plush menagerie. "More tea, Mr. Dom?" she inquired with gravity. He extended his cup, a willing participant in the ritual. "Please," he rumbled, his voice a low thunder. "And another cookie for Mr. Rabbit. He appears famished." Lily beamed, miming the act of pouring. "Mr. Rabbit is perpetually hungry. He is a growing rabbit." From the doorway, Elena observed this pocket of tranquility, an exile from its peace. Her heart wrestled with a violent confluence of emotions, warring with her loathing for his world. Yet, witnessing the genuine warmth in Dominic's gaze, she could not deny what Lily had lacked for years: a father's total adoration. But another observer lurked. Further down the hall, Victoria Blackwell watched from the gloom, her expression an inscrutable mask. She had maintained her distance since the stark confrontation at the hospital. The echo of Dominic's glacial dismissal still resonated, yet a strange compulsion held her there, a voyeur to this new dynamic. Her tea party concluded, Lily skipped down the corridor, clutching her stuffed rabbit, oblivious to Victoria's static presence until the final moment. The child's foot snagged on the carpet, pitching her forward with a small cry. Victoria's reaction was pure reflex, an instinct overriding her cold reserve. Her arms extended, intercepting the girl just shy of the floor. Lily gazed up at her elegant rescuer, their shared gray eyes connecting for the very first time. "Thank you, pretty lady," Lily offered, completely unfazed. Victoria froze, her hands resting on the child's shoulders. processing the novel sensation of her own granddaughter's warmth. A long dormant emotional barrier inside her fractured, releasing something she had imprisoned ages ago. "You must be more careful," Victoria managed, her voice strained and unfamiliar. Lily simply offered a solemn nod. "Mommy says I run too fast, but walking is so boring." Against her own volition, the barest hint of a smile touched Victoria's lips. She released the child abruptly as if burned and pivoted away without another word. But Elena had witnessed the entire exchange. The tremor in Victoria's hands, the infinitesimal fissure in her matriarchal armor. It would seem the matriarch was not composed entirely of malice. Deep beneath the layers of frost, a heart showed the first signs of thawing. For Elena, however, sleep remained an elusive stranger. She lay at the vast bed, gazing at the moonlit ceiling, while beside her, Lily slept with the profound peace of the innocent, her breathing a gentle rhythm. The stuffed rabbit was held tightly in her grasp. The child's nights were no longer plagued by terrors or fever. She was secure, recovering, and wholly unaware of the psychological storm gathering within her mother. But Elena's mind was a relentless tempest. At last she slipped from bed, donning a robe and seeking the solace of the balcony. She stepped into the night, allowing the cool air to soothe her. Below, Chicago glittered, a sprawling constellation of light. It was the city that had once been her sanctuary, then the source of her terror, and now the vortex that had pulled her back into its orbit. "Sleep evades you too." Elena's heart seized. She turned to find Dominic emerging from the deep shadows of the balcony. His jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled to the elbow. In this state, he was a disarming specter of the man she had loved 5 years prior. "I was not aware you were here," she said quietly. "I find myself here most nights." He drew nearer, his gaze fixed on the urban landscape. "It's the one place where the world falls silent." For a protracted moment, they stood in shared silence, two souls tormented by the same ghosts, separated by a chasm of 5 years of agony and deceit. Elena's grip on the railing intensified. "Tell me," Dominic finally broke the silence. "Recount the events of those 5 years." Elena closed her eyes, bracing against the venomous tide of memory. "I held 3 jobs," she began, her voice a near inaudible whisper. "Days cleaning homes, nights serving tables, and weekends in a laundromat. Our home was one room, where mold crept up the walls and the neighbors' arguments were a nightly chorus." Her hands trembled on the balustrade. "There were weeks I went without food so Lily could eat. On some nights, my only recourse was to hold her as she wept from a sickness I lacked the funds to treat. I did everything possible, Dominic. Absolutely everything. It was never sufficient." Dominic's knuckles blanched against the stone. His jaw was a knot of tension, the muscles rigid with fury. "I should have found you," he rasped. His voice was raw, frayed with a rage he could barely contain. "I should have searched with more resolve. I should have dismantled this city before your mother orchestrated your disappearance." Elena shook her head wearily. "A different name, a different city. She had me monitored for months, ensuring my exile was permanent. I returned to Chicago only for Lily's sake, for superior medical care." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I genuinely believed I could enter and exit the city undetected. The naivety was astounding." Dominic turned toward her, and the moonlight revealed an expression she never anticipated. Pure, exposed anguish. "My thoughts were never free of you," he confessed. "Not for a single day." You were the phantom that haunted my every dream. Your face was the final image before sleep and the first upon waking. Tears welled in Elena's eyes, hot and sharp. I believed you despised me. I was certain you had accepted your mother's narrative, that I was a mercenary who used a child as a snare, that my love was a fabrication. In 2 strides, Dominic closed the space between them. He lifted his hand with immense deliberation, allowing her the chance to retreat. When she remained, his fingers made gentle contact with her cheek, brushing away a tear. I know your nature, Elena, he murmured. I never doubted it. No falsehood could alter what I know to be true. And for one impossible moment, the chasm of 5 years ceased to exist. For an instant, they were 23 and 32 once more, sovereigns of a rooftop kingdom believing their love was invulnerable. Then the present intruded, shattering the illusion. Elena recoiled, breaking the connection. Her arms folded across her body, a self-imposed shield. I cannot repeat this, Dominic, she whispered, her voice fracturing. Not in this world, not when your life is under constant threat, not when every shadow conceals a potential adversary. I will not raise my daughter in a war zone. Dominic's hand fell to his side, his features hardening as the momentary vulnerability receded behind his customary fortress of control. This is the world I command, Elena. It is all I can be. I know, a profound, devastating sorrow filled her eyes. That is precisely what terrifies me. She retreated inside, abandoning Dominic to the cold wind and the immense burden of his history. Elsewhere, concealed in shadow, Serena Cole's forbearance had finally eroded. For 10 days, she had observed. Dominic's fixation on this new child, the tenderness for Elena she was never afforded, and the complete transfer of her own world to a rival. Every individual has a threshold for endurance, and Serena had just violently collided with her own. The plan she conceived was brutal in its simplicity, elegant in its execution, and designed to be untraceable. For years, she had cultivated influence within the staff, binding them to her with their debts and their fears. One such pawn, a young kitchen maid named Rosa, was indebted over a gambling issue Serena had discreetly resolved months before. Nothing lethal, Serena whispered, pressing a small vial into Rosa's trembling hand. Merely enough to induce illness. A few drops in her milk. A fever will manifest, inciting panic. They will hasten her to the hospital, convinced her prior ailment has returned. Rosa's complexion turned ashen. Miss Cole, I am unable. She is only a child. You can, and you shall. Serena's smile was a weapon of fractured crystal. Unless you prefer Dominic, learn of your brother's involvement in the West Side shipment theft. His reputation for leniency toward thieves is non-existent. Rosa was ensnared. They were all merely puppets once Serena chose to pull the strings. By midday, the child was violently ill, her small frame racked with convulsions as tears streamed down her pallid face. The vitality she had so recently reclaimed vanished in a matter of hours, rendering her limp and sobbing in Elena's embrace. Mommy, my stomach hurts. Elena's cries tore through the mansion's silence. She clutched Lily, a primal maternal terror constricting her throat. Not again. The thought was a silent scream. Please, not this again. Dominic materialized instantly, his expression a stark canvas of incandescent rage and fear. The physician was summoned. Tests and blood work commenced, but Dominic would not wait for diagnostics. Procure the kitchen security recordings, he commanded his head of security. Every camera, every perspective. From midnight until that instant, the recordings documented everything. Rose's anxious gestures, the swift motion of her hand over Lily's glass, her deliberate avoidance of the child's gaze. Rose's composure shattered within minutes of interrogation. Confessions and tears revealed the scheme, the toxin, the directive, and the architect of the betrayal. Serena Cole, Rosa wept. She coerced me. My family was threatened. Please, Mr. Blackwell, I never intended this. As the name contaminated the room, Dominic remained motionless, a figure of granite. His expression was a mask of stone, yet his eyes burned with a furious blaze. He moved toward the west wing without a word. Serena was preparing to flee when her door was violently torn from its frame. Splintered wood gave way to Dominic's imposing silhouette, a veritable harbinger of doom. She turned, any prepared defense dissolving to nothing at the sight of his face. Dominic, allow me to explain. You administered poison to my daughter. His voice was a quiet, chilling threat. A heavy silence permeates the room, the kind of quiet that heralds an eruption of violence. Serena's collapse is a portrait of desperate obsession, her confession reframing destructive acts as a warped form of devotion. She casts Elena not as a rival, but as an existential threat to her reality with Dominic. In response, his movement is not a walk, but the deliberate advance of retribution. His grasp is an instrument of brutal patriarchal justice, yanking Serena from her delusion. His snarled words, "You touched my daughter, my blood," are not just an accusation, but a verdict on the violation of his lineage. As he removes her, the averted eyes of his staff and guards underscore a core tenet of this world. Power is maintained by the complicity of those who choose to see nothing. At the main entrance, he cast her onto the gravel with the disdain reserved for refuse. Should you ever come near my family again? Dominic seethed, towering over her defeated figure. Your father's loyalty will be forgotten, and your existence will be erased. Is that clear? Serena gazed up, her face a ruin of disheveled hair. Her tears had vanished, replaced by a more volatile substance, pure, unadulterated hatred. You will come to rue this day, she vowed softly. I swear it. Dominic turned away and re-entered his domain. The gates of Blackwell Manor closed with the resonant finality of a crypt being sealed, and Serena Cole began to orchestrate her vengeance. A torrential downpour consumed Chicago's South Side. Serena Cole sought shelter beneath the overhang of a decaying structure, her expensive attire completely drenched. Mascara streaked her face in dark rivulets, her hair a sodden mess. She was left with nothing. No residence, no funds, and no one to offer her sanctuary. The only warmth she possessed was the fire of her own animosity. 48 hours had elapsed since her expulsion by Dominic. 2 days spent in squalid motels, liquidating what jewelry she had salvaged. 2 days of reliving her degradation in a torturous, repeating cycle. Yet Serena Cole was not defined by defeat. A single phone call was made, one name uttered, and she now stood before the city's most perilous threshold. A warehouse door groaned open, revealing 2 armed figures from the shadows. After searching her and confiscating her phone and a concealed blade, they motioned for her to enter. The warehouse's interior was a disordered labyrinth of containers and rusted machinery. Armed sentinels occupied every corner. The atmosphere was dense with the odor of smoke and fuel. This was the nexus of the Southside's power, the domain of the man who vowed to see Dominic Blackwell utterly destroyed. Marcus Kane sat at a steel table with his lieutenants. He was 45, his face a veritable map of violent encounters. A prominent scar ran from his brow to his jaw, a memento from a blade fight he concluded by ripping out his opponent's throat. His eyes, the shade of old blood, held no trace of compassion. He raised his gaze as Serena approached. A distorted smile formed on his scarred features. "Well, now," his voice was a gravelly rasp. "Dominic Blackwell's personal shadow. Word is he cast you aside." Serena's posture was rigid. "I am nobody's shadow. Not any longer." Marcus reclined, his gaze frigid and appraising, like a hunter evaluating potential prey. "Then what brings you to my territory?" "You're aware of my policy. Any associate of Blackwell meets there and here." "I am." Serena advanced, her eyes burning with fury. "That is precisely my reason. I can deliver it all, Marcus. Estate plans, guard rotations, access codes, his complete logistics network," she paused, "and his vulnerability?" One of Marcus's eyebrows arched slightly. His subordinates exchanged uneasy glances. "And this vulnerability is female?" Serena nearly spat her reply. "An insignificant waitress from his past. She has returned with a child in tow. His child. He is fixated on them, distracted, exposed." A profound silence ensued as Marcus's fingers began a slow cadence on the tabletop. A decade prior, half of the city's criminal element answered to him. Then Dominic Blackwell appeared and seized everything, his dominion, his reputation. A single violent night of conflict cost him 3 brothers, a loss seared into his memory. For 10 years, he had painstakingly rebuilt, awaiting his moment for retribution. "And what do you demand in return?" Marcus finally inquired. A chilling smile graced Serena's lips. "I want them eliminated, the woman and the child both. I want Dominic to witness their deaths before your bullet claims him. I want him to experience total loss." A low, resonant laugh came from Marcus, echoing like distant thunder. "There's a genuine vein of cruelty in you, isn't there?" He rose, his large form eclipsing the light. "For 10 years, I've awaited the ideal opportunity. Perhaps destiny has just presented itself." He extended his hand. Serena accepted it instantly. "I think we have an accord," Marcus stated, and their pact was sealed by mutual animosity. 2 spirits warped by animosity, joined by one objective: the annihilation of Dominic Blackwell and all he held dear. Beyond the warehouse, thunder announced its presence over Chicago. A tempest was brewing. Following Serena's defection, Blackwell Manor transformed into a citadel with twice the guards on patrol. Its surveillance network was tripled, its unblinking lenses multiplying. All personnel underwent renewed scrutiny, their histories intensely examined. Entry and exit were forbidden without Dominic's explicit permission. The gates were locked as armed men kept watch. Yet within this hardened shell, a delicate new life began to emerge. Once Serena's toxin was purged, Lily was transformed. Her previous lethargy was replaced by a small whirlwind of vitality. She became a streak of brightness, her laughter echoing through halls long accustomed to silence. The child was naming flora and pursuing insects, illuminating the Stark estate. Dominic simply observed, utterly astonished. In a fortnight, he received an intensive education in fatherhood, discovering her preferred hues, the way her nose would wrinkle with amusement, and the perfect fit of her small hand in his. Each second with her felt like winning a prize he had never known he was competing for. However, one monumental discussion remained unavoidable. One evening, Dominic discovered Elena in the library observing Lily's sketch. He stated simply, "The time has come. She has a right to know the truth." Elena met his gaze, her expression a conflict of terror and optimism, before offering a slow, deliberate affirmation. They positioned themselves on either side of the child. Lily glanced up from her art, her gray eyes inquisitive, detecting the change in atmosphere. Elena's voice quavered. "Darling, we have something very significant to tell you." Lily cocked her head. "Is it a gift?" "I am hoping for a gift." Dominic lowered himself to his knees to meet her gaze. A tightness formed in his throat. The very hands capable of taking a life now shook as they reached for his daughter's. "Lily," he began, his tone severe, I am your father. Your biological father. I have always been, I simply was unaware. And I'm profoundly sorry for my absence." Lily's gray eyes, a mirror of his own, widened with comprehension. Her gaze shifted from her mother to Dominic, the silence immense. "So, am I allowed to call you Daddy now?" The inquiry was so guileless, so devoid of the fury he anticipated, that it shattered his composure. In that instant, the fortress around his heart crumbled. For the first time since his own childhood, Dominic Blackwell wept. "Yes, my dear," he managed, his voice broken. "You may call me Daddy." Her small arms encircled his neck with fierce tenacity. "I have always wished for a daddy," she murmured. "And now I have one." Yet Victoria was concealed in the doorway's shadows, observing the entire scene. The matriarch's expression was an unreadable mask, though her knuckles were white on the doorframe. An emotional tremor she fought to suppress ran through her before she vanished, completely unnoticed. Later, under a stark moonlight, Elena's solitude is interrupted by Victoria's arrival. The matriarch appears stripped of her regal armor, exposing a raw vulnerability. A dense silence hangs between them, fraught with unspoken history. Victoria's confession, 3 words torn from her very core, finally breaks it. "I was wrong." Elena remained silent. The arsenal of angry retorts she had rehearsed for years simply evaporated. Victoria's voice, once a tool of command, now trembled. "I framed it as loyalty for my son, for the family, but it was only a shield for my pride, my terror of losing control." Drawing a ragged breath, she continued, "I stole 5 years of life from you, from Dominic, and from a child who deserved a father. That is a debt I can never repay. Its shame will be my shadow." Elena looked at the architect of her suffering and finally perceived the fault lines, the guilt that was consuming her from within. "But I will spend my remaining days in atonement," Victoria insisted. "If you allow it, if you grant me the chance to be the grandmother that little girl is owed." Elena was still. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, Lily slept. Finally, Elena offered a single, deliberate nod. It was a minuscule gesture, yet it sealed a truce. Victoria's eyes glistened with tears her pride refused to spill. She departed without another word. The 2 adversaries were now allied, wholly unaware that miles off their collective fate was being irrevocably decided. The apparatus of their ruin was already in motion. The assault began at 3 a.m. The mansion's slumber was shattered, not by a noise, but by a profound silence as its digital nervous system was severed. Every screen died, every lock yielded. The fortress was now just a hollow, undefended shell. Serena's digital keys had worked perfectly. A violent explosion tore the main gates from their moorings. A convoy of black vehicles pierced the smoke, disgorging a tide of gunmen. They advanced with the chilling precision of a monolith, swarming the estate. Marcus Kane had brought 60 of his most devoted soldiers. These were men for whom this night was the culmination of a decade-long vendetta. Inside, chaos erupted. Dominic was already in motion, driven by a primal instinct that outpaced the explosion's shockwave. The pistol was in his hand, his entire being focused on a single imperative, Elena. He breached her room to find her clutching Lily. The child's sobs, a frail sound against the symphony of gunfire and breaking glass. "We are leaving now." Two of his men appeared, rifles raised. Dominic's command was immediate. "Get them to the panic room. Sub-level. Go." "Dominic!" Elena's hand reached for him. "Go!" His voice was an uncrossable line. "I will come for you. I promise." He pressed a hard, swift kiss to Lily's forehead and vanished into the churning smoke. The mansion had transitioned into a war zone, its marble floors littered with bodies, its art shredded by stray rounds. His security detail fought with valor, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Marcus's strategy was surgical, systematically severing every artery of defense. Through the pandemonium, Dominic moved like a phantom, each shot finding its mark. But for every man he put down, two more emerged from the shadows. Elena raced through the service corridors, pressing Lily's head to her chest to muffle the sounds of war. Victoria followed, her elegant nightgown torn and smeared with soot. Flanked by guards, they were nearing the cellar stairs when their fortune was finally exhausted. Marcus's men emerged from an adjoining hall, sealing their escape. The lead guard fell, his chest stitched with bullets. The second took two assailants with him before he too was neutralized, his life bleeding out onto the floor. Elena froze. Lily screamed. The gunmen leveled their weapons. One of the men offered a predatory grin, flashing a gold tooth. "Look at the prizes we have here." It was then Victoria moved. The 62-year-old matriarch, a lifelong warrior of words and wealth, became a human shield for her bloodline. "Run!" she commanded Elena, her tone solid steel despite the fear in her eyes. "I can hold them off, Victoria!" "No, you will protect my granddaughter." Victoria's decree was final. She shoved Elena toward the stairs. "Go now." For a fractured second, Elena hesitated, watching Victoria retrieve a pistol from a dead guard, her hands trembling as she raised the foreign object. "I said go!" And Elena ran. She plunged down the stairs with Lily as a storm of gunfire erupted above. Lily cried out for her grandmother, but there could be no looking back. At the top of the stairs, Victoria Blackwell faced the onslaught alone, the weapon feeling utterly alien in her grasp. Her hands shook, her aim was non-existent, but she kept firing, screaming with a primal mix of fury and terror. She was atoning for the family she almost broke. One attacker fell, another staggered back but more advanced. A bullet found her shoulder. She stumbled but did not fall. A flower of red bloomed on her silk gown. She kept firing, buying seconds of life for Elena and Lily. A second round struck her side. Victoria collapsed, the gun clattering from her grip. But she had succeeded. She had purchased them the time they needed. As her vision faded to black, Victoria allowed herself a faint smile. For once she had been a shield, but it was not enough. Elena was so close. The steel door, a beacon in the gloom, was just 20 feet away. Sanctuary was within arm's reach. She was a breath away from deliverance. Then the basement flooded with armed men. They emerged from every doorway, a sudden, inescapable net. Elena spun, searching for an exit that no longer existed. She was trapped, surrounded, with Lily screaming in her arms. The heavy thud of boots descended the stairs. Elena looked up to see Victoria's limp, bleeding form being dragged down. She was battered, but defiant. An open-handed strike silenced her. "Grandma!" Lily shrieked, her small arms reaching out. Elena pulled her daughter tighter, trying to shield her from the horror, her own heart hammering against her ribs. This was the end. The wall of soldiers parted, and through the opening strode Marcus Kane, a triumphant, sickening smirk playing on his lips. Tailing him, stepping delicately through the carnage, was Serena Cole, the serpent from within the Blackwell house. Marcus spread his arms wide, his voice dripping with theatrical mockery. "Where is all that power now?" Victoria responded by spitting blood near his feet. "You will not win! Dominic will hunt you down!" With a sharp crack, Marcus struck the words from her mouth. "Dominic Blackwell is upstairs fighting for his own life. He won't even register that you're gone." Serena circled Elena like a shark, her eyes gleaming. "I warned you," she hissed. "What is mine stays mine." Elena stared back, her gaze unbroken. "You're insane." "Perhaps," Serena conceded with a grin, "but I am the one who has won." She reached for Lily's hair, but the girl recoiled. "Don't you dare touch her," Elena snarled. Serena merely chuckled. "So fierce!" The little mother bear. Her smile turned venomous. "It will not matter for long." At a snap of his fingers, Marcus gave the order. "Move them, we're leaving." His men acted with machine-like purpose. Victoria was hauled to her feet while Elena was shoved forward, clinging to Lily as she was seized by rough hands. She fought, but she was overwhelmed. Forced into a van, the world was extinguished as the doors slammed shut. Through a small, grimy window, Elena saw a final image of Blackwell Manor, smoke billowing as flames consumed the East Wing. Her prison, her sanctuary, now a pyre. The van melted into the night. 3 stories above, Dominic finally reached the basement, having cut a path through Marcus's soldiers. His suit was shredded, his body wounded. But a new, more profound terror spurred him on. The safe room door hung open. "No." The word was a choked negation of reality. "No, no, no!" He burst in. The room was a void, empty. A smear of blood on the floor led to a slumped guard, his breathing shallow. Dominic knelt. "Where are they? Where is my family?" The man's eyes fluttered open. Each word was a final, painful effort. "Taken. Kane's men, 3 women, the van headed south." In that moment, Dominic's entire universe fractured. His mother, his child, the woman he loved, all taken. He threw his head back and released a sound that was no longer human, a raw howl of agony that vibrated through the bones of the ruined mansion. It was the sound of a soul pushed beyond its breaking point, the cry of a man who had lost his entire reason for being. When he finally stood, something in his eyes had been forged anew. The grief had burned away, leaving behind only the cold promise of annihilation for all who were responsible. Marcus Kane had taken his family. Dominic Blackwell would, in turn, burn the world to the ground to get them back. As dawn stained the Chicago sky the color of blood, he had not slept, had not rested, had not allowed a moment's weakness since the night had swallowed his world whole. Every tick of the clock was a moment they spent in his enemy's grasp. Another second of their suffering, another step toward a fate he refused to contemplate. He would not waste one. His command center was already online, in the bunker beneath the West Wing, the only part of the estate the assault had not touched. The walls were a living tapestry of maps, surveillance feeds, and open comms channels. His men moved with quiet lethality, preparing for war. Dominic was the calm, cold eye of the hurricane. "Give me a status on our forces," he ordered. Carter, His long-serving second-in-command checked his tablet. 217 are confirmed. More are mobilizing by the hour. We've recalled every asset. It is not enough. Dominic's voice was like stone. Marcus will have 100 men fortified. We need to be overwhelming. Carter hesitated. Sir, there is another recourse, one you have consistently forbidden. For the first time in his reign, as the city's sovereign of shadows, Dominic Blackwell summoned his rivals. The directives radiated outward. To the West Side Consortium, the Harbor Street Syndicate, the Russians controlling the ports, every entity bound by treaty to the Blackwell dynasty. One by one, their visages materialized on the encrypted channel. The monitors became a mosaic of old adversaries and uneasy allies, men who had warred against one another, all now observing him. You understand the reason for this council? Dominic's voice resonated. Marcus Kane has desecrated my home and seized my family. He has fractured every code we adhere to, every armistice, every pact. And you believe we will aid in their retrieval? Queried Viktor Petrov, the Russian patriarch, his tone thick with disbelief. Why should our men be jeopardized for your domestic affair? Because his impunity today makes you all vulnerable tomorrow. He targets my family now. Later, he may target yours. This is not an assault on me, but on the very foundation of our world. A profound stillness descended. Then, gradually, heads began to assent. This was not about allegiance, it was about cold, calculated survival. Marcus Kane had become a contagion threatening them all, and such a threat required eradication. By midday, their collective force had tripled. 300 operatives from Chicago's criminal strata, unified against a shared menace. Vehicles were provisioned, units were briefed. The objective was set. A derelict warehouse on the South Side docks, the same ground where Marcus had forged his empire. He likely deemed himself impregnable there. A catastrophic miscalculation. Dominic personally architected the assault schematic. 3 tactical squads would converge from distinct vectors. Snipers would command the adjacent rooftops. A demolition team stood ready to breach the compound's defenses. Objective 1, extract the hostages unharmed. Objective 2, leave no other soul standing. While his soldiers performed their final equipment checks, Dominic sought a moment of solitude in his study. He clutched a photograph, a worn, creased image discovered among Elena's possessions. It depicted Elena and Lily in a sunlit park, smiling for the camera. Lily was no older than 2 years of age. Her gray eyes gleamed with unadulterated joy. Elena appeared weary but content, her arms encircling her daughter protectively. 2 years of their history, immortalized in a single frame. 2 years that had been wrested from him. He would not surrender another minute. Dominic pressed the image to his lips, his voice a near silent whisper containing the force of a blood promise. I am coming. Just endure. He secured the photograph inside his vest, directly over his heart, and rejoined his assembled force. The procession was a leviathan, spanning several city blocks, a column of black SUVs, armored transports, and motorcycles advanced toward the south side like a dark, inexorable tide. 300 soldiers, equipped for a minor war, and at its vanguard Dominic Blackwell prepared for the conclusion. The warehouse erupted into a maelstrom of calculated violence. Dominic's forces struck from all 3 directions in perfect concert. A shaped charge disintegrated the main gates. Tactical units breached the side entrances. Snipers on nearby structures neutralized Marcus's sentinels before they could sound an alarm. 300 soldiers poured into the complex like a flood of pure retribution. Dominic himself spearheaded the primary assault, a wraith gliding through the smoke and pandemonium. The firearm in his grip was a mere extension of his resolve. Each projectile met its mark. Any who obstructed his path were systematically erased. He was no longer a man, he was an avatar of vengeance. "Their position," he demanded, lifting a wounded enemy by his collar. "The captives." "Where?" The soldier's eyes widened in terror as he gestured with a trembling hand toward the rear of the structure. "Storage sector! 3rd floor! Kane is with them!" Dominic released him and moved. From within the chamber, Elena could perceive the unfolding battle. Each detonation intensified Lily's cries. Every gunshot reverberates with a duality of terror and hope. Elena instinctively becomes a human shield for her daughter, a primal defense against the violent storm. Nearby, Victoria is a fading portrait of consequence, the wounds from the manor bleeding out her authority. She has become a pale specter of the queen she once was. Though her breathing is a shallow struggle, Victoria's gaze remains fixed on Lily, a final poignant act of guardianship. Across the room, Marcus Kane has devolved from predator to cornered prey, his arrogance erased by the encroaching sounds of his own demise. Elena's voice, trembling but resolute, announces the inevitable. "Dominic is here!" "You are already defeated," Marcus whirled, his expression contorted by pure fury. "If I am destined for damnation, I will drag his beloved family with me." He faced Serena. "Execute it. Eliminate them all, now." Serena's eyes were feral, her sanity utterly consumed by madness. She leveled a quaking pistol, its barrel aimed squarely at Lily. "Bid farewell to your daughter," she murmured to Elena. The universe ground to a halt. Victoria registered the weapon, targeting her granddaughter, saw oblivion aimed at the child she was only beginning to know. In that instant, every failing, every transgression of her past converged into a singular imperative. She would not let them down this time. Utterly broken, Victoria surges forward, absorbing the bullet meant for Lily as Serena discharges her weapon. The door is blasted from its hinges as Dominic enters, firearm raised. He assesses the scene in a fraction of a second. He sees Serena holding the gun, his mother collapsing, and Elena crying out. One shot. Serena falls, a look of astonishment on her face as she crumbles. Marcus attempts to flee, but Dominic intercepts him, slamming him against the wall with the force of a locomotive. "Eliminate me, and the entirety of Chicago will hunt you," Marcus gasps, bleeding. "It will be a perpetual war." Dominic simply presses the muzzle to his temple, his eyes devoid of all warmth. "Then let the war commence." Bang! Marcus Kane crumples to the floor, permanently silenced. Dominic lets his weapon fall and rushes to his mother. Victoria is bleeding out in Elena's arms as a weeping Lily kneels nearby, her small hands on her grandmother's face. "Mother," his voice cracks as he kneels. "Mother, hold on. Medics are en route." But Victoria offers a strangely serene smile. "I kept them safe," she whispers, her gaze on Elena and Lily. "I finally did something right." She reaches for Dominic. "My son, I regret everything." Then her hand falls, her eyes close. The reign of Victoria Blackwell, the formidable Ice Queen, is over. Outside, the gunfire has ceased. The conflict is won. Marcus Kane's entire organization has been dismantled. But within this room, the true war was lost. Victoria is cradled by her son, her life seeping onto the cold concrete. Each breath is shallower, each heartbeat fainter. That single projectile had fulfilled its purpose. No fortune could reverse its effect. Dominic holds her fast, trying to stem the bleeding, shouting for medics. He is pleading for an impossible intervention, yet he understands its futility. "Dominic," she murmurs, her voice a fragile thread. "Stop. Please." He refuses. He shakes his head, insisting, "Don't speak. Conserve your energy." Her hand, now chilling, touches his cheek. "You must listen, my son. There is no more time." Dominic chokes on a sob, and the emotional dam he maintained for years finally shatters. Elena is stunned. She had never witnessed him weep, but there he is, utterly undone. Victoria begins her final confession. "I was terrified of losing you. After your father's death, you were all I possessed. I could not allow anyone to take you from me. So I drove away anyone who brought you happiness." She coughs, a trace of blood on her lips. "I claimed it was for your protection, but it was a fortress constructed from my own fear." "Mother, stop!" "No, listen." Her gaze fixes on his. "I was mistaken about everything." "Mistaken about Elena, about Lily, about the true meaning of family." She turns toward a tearful Elena and extends her hand. "Care for him?" Victoria implores. He projects an image of strength, but he is merely a boy who lost his father. A boy who learned to armor his heart because he was taught that love was a vulnerability. Elena clasps her hand more firmly. "I promise." Victoria manages a faint smile, then looks at Lily. The child has moved closer, her face a mask of confusion and sorrow. "My granddaughter," Victoria breathes. "I wish we had been granted more time. I squandered so much of it on fear." Lily places her small hand on Victoria's cooling one. "Don't be sad, Grandma," she whispers. "It's all right. Mommy says, when you go to sleep forever, you awaken in a beautiful place with flowers." Victoria's eyes well with tears, but she offers a genuine smile for the first time. It is not the tactical, icy expression Elena had come to expect. It was not a disdainful sneer either. This was an authentic, tranquil smile. "Grandma," Victoria echoes, savoring the word. "I like that thought." Then her eyes close, her breathing ceases, and her hand falls slack. At 62 years of age, she is finally at peace. Dominic is utterly devastated, his silent sobs muffled in his mother's hair. The most feared man in Chicago is completely broken. Elena moves to them, enveloping them both in her arms, drawing Lily into their embrace. They are a fractured unit on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage, damaged but unified. Outside, the sun begins to rise. This is not a resolution, but a beginning. 1 month later. Victoria Blackwell's funeral is a monumental affair, an event of a scale Chicago had rarely witnessed. The entire cathedral is filled with an eclectic mix, from magnates in bespoke suits to common citizens, politicians, merchants, luminaries, and the anonymous, all gathered for a woman they presumed to know, but of whom they were truly ignorant. And here lies the narrative's great revelation. Victoria harbored a profound secret. Beneath her frigid exterior, she was the secret benefactor of the city's most vulnerable, funding orphanages, shelters, and countless charities. Her clandestine generosity sustained families and underwrote children's futures. The full truth emerged only upon the reading of her will. It turned out that thousands owed their lives to her, yet had never known their patron. Now they were all present. Elena, holding Lily's hand beside Dominic, observes the congregation and at last comprehends. Victoria was not a monolith of cruelty. Fear guided her hand, leading to disastrous choices in the name of a flawed love. Her final gambit was an ultimate act of penance. Concurrently, Blackwell Manor is reborn from its ashes as Dominic meticulously restores what Marcus's violence had desecrated. While its Gothic bones remain, the estate's soul is transformed. Light now floods spaces once owned by shadow. For the first time, a child's laughter echoes through its corridors, a testament to Lily's new dominion. She animates once somber corridors with vibrant energy. Her world is now one of sunlit tea parties and butterfly hunts. Her crayon art adorns Dominic's office, treasured as if they were masterpieces. The generational cycle of revenge and violence is being deliberately broken. He cedes operational control, dissolves his illicit ventures, and pursues legitimacy. It is a monumental task aimed at building a legacy, not an empire of fear. Elena, too, finds her purpose renewed, reclaiming the teaching vocation she abandoned 5 years prior. She now commands a second-grade classroom on the north side, where each child reaffirms her quiet mission to heal the world. And Lily is the embodiment of this renewal. Attending her mother's school, she forms connections with ease. The withdrawn, fragile child from the hospital has vanished, replaced by a being of pure vitality and joy. She represents the improbable miracle born from profound chaos. Morning sunlight now sanctifies the manor, bathing it in warmth. What once mocked their suffering now feels like a benediction, a total 180-degree turn from tragedy to tranquility. Consider this scene. Dominic, the patriarch, sits at the head of the table, oblivious to the world's news. He is wholly consumed by his daughter's chronicle of a stuffed rabbit's odyssey, affording it the gravity of a tactical briefing. From across the table, Elena observes, her heart swelling with the moment's significance. Lily pauses her tale with a simple request to her father. Dominic's resulting smile is a relic from 5 years past, from a time before their lives fractured, an authentic, unguarded expression she believed lost forever. "Everyday princess," he responds with profound softness. "Every single day." Lily, overjoyed, resumes her breakfast, plotting playground conquests. Elena's attention drifts to the portrait of Victoria Blackwell, whose painted gray eyes hold both their famed frost and a hidden ember. A small brass plaque reads simply, "Beloved Mother and Grandmother." It is a quiet confirmation that love ultimately prevailed. Elena recalls the chasm between them, the constant peril and the crushing losses they endured. Yet here they are, seated together in the light. In that moment, the meaning of Victoria's final words crystallizes. The purpose of their harrowing journey. The most torturous narratives can yield the most beautiful conclusions. Victoria's creed was true. Love justifies the battle, and redemption often demands the ultimate price. Outside, Chicago awakens to spring. Skeletal winter trees are now dressed in verdant green and blossoms. The garden is alive with birdsong. The world itself seems to be regenerating, mirroring the family's own restoration. Elena reaches for Dominic's hand, and in his gaze, a universe of understanding passes between them. Gratitude, fidelity, a silent pact for a future forged together. They have navigated a crucible to reach this peace, and they will not relinquish it. The story of Elena, Dominic, Lily, and Victoria thus becomes an allegory for our own lives. It demonstrates that family is forged in sacrifice, not merely inherited by bloodline. It posits that redemption is always possible, regardless of the descent. Victoria Blackwell's fortress was born of fear, yet she dismantled it with a single decisive act. Her legacy prompts a question. What fortifications do we construct in our own lives? What bridges remain for us to mend? If their profound journey has resonated with you, consider subscribing and enabling notifications for our daily analyses. Your engagement helps amplify these narratives of hope for a global audience. Each interaction extends this light to another who may be in darkness tonight. We invite you to share your perspective. What emotions did this narrative evoke? Did it echo your own experiences with family and forgiveness? Contribute your insights to the community in the comments below. Your reflections are the lifeblood of this channel and the core of our purpose. We sincerely thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in the transformative power of story. We wish you wellness, contentment, and serenity on your own journey. May you deepen your connections. May you find the courage to grant forgiveness and the fortitude to begin anew. Until our next exploration, be well and remain mindful of one another.